Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're finally ready. Thank you for your patience while we were setting up and dealing with some logistic issues passing through security. Thank you so much for joining us today. There's tea and coffee and water, so please help yourselves. Before we start, I also just want to note that this event is going to be recorded and live streamed, so I hope everybody is comfortable with that. And also note that there is interpretation for this meeting, so you can listen and speak in English, French, and Spanish. So please feel free to use the interpretation facilities. So thank you once again for joining us today. My name is Vera Coelho. I am the Executive Director and Vice President of Oceana in Europe. And it's my pleasure to welcome you today to talk about seafood. Because Europe is one of the largest seafood markets in the world. And seafood is also one of the most globally traded commodities. And yet, almost half of the seafood that we consume here in Europe is imported. Almost half of it does not have a lot of information, and over 70% of it is imported. So when we don't have the information about the species, the origin, the catch method of a lot of this seafood, we also run a higher risk that the seafood that we are consuming, that we are putting on our plates and on the plates of our families, are associated, for example, with potential illegal fishing or overfishing, unsustainable practices, and even human rights and labor abuses. So this is a situation that can really put those more scrupulous fishers, those that do follow the rules, at a very unfair disadvantage. And this is, of course, something that we do not want. So we have really, for today, gathered a good group of experts in the field to discuss these issues. We will start first with an introduction from one of our hosts, a member of the European Parliament, Paulo Cabral. Thank you so much for hosting us today. And we will also hear an intervention from a representative of the Cabinet of Commissioner Kadis, Mr. Eliofotu. Thank you so much for joining us. Followed by 3 presentations to set the scene. And then we will hear a couple of reactions to those presentations, and we will also have a panel discussion with a diverse group of stakeholders. Since we have started a bit late, I will try to be a very stern timekeeper, so I will ask speakers to keep to their time, and if I'm successful in that, hopefully we will also have a little bit of time at the end of the meeting for a bit of Q&A and discussion. So in today's event, we will discuss why and how consumers, chefs, retailers, and policymakers should have access to reliable information, and also why the EU's commitment to a level playing field and to the fight against illegal fishing is so important and must be matched by strong rules and effective import controls. So we will hear from investigators, from NGOs, from diverse actors across the supply chain of seafood, who will discuss why transparent and robust seafood labels are so important for sustainability, for fairness, and for accountability, as well as for consumer trust. So thank you once again to our hosts, Mr. Paulo Cabral, and also MEP Sargiacomo, who will join us a little bit later today, and also to the SEARICA intergroup that has helped us put together this event. So I will open this discussion now by inviting MEP Paulo do Nascimento Cabral to give us a few introductory words.
Good morning to all. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you, Vera. It's a pleasure for hosting this important event, and thank you for challenging us to organize it. It's a very important issue for us, and also Eric Sargiacomo is also a good friend. He's always defending also in the PESH committee these issues, and also to thank Mr. Eliofotu, coming from the Commissioner's Cabinet, that is also a good friend of us and a good defender of the fisheries sector. and transparency among the food supply chain. So it's quite important to have your inputs here. Thanks a lot, and send our best regards to the Commissioner, and thank for his engagement in all of these issues. I will not take too long because, as you may know, I'm a rapporteur from the initiative report on the role of social, economic, and environmental standards in safeguarding fair competition for all aquatic food products, as well as improving food security. And this is the issue that will deal with not only economic questions, because I read some of the studies that are going to be presented today, and we are eating some cases less than what we are buying. So it's important to have a clear information of what we are eating. And I saw that even the bluefin tuna steak sometimes is replaced by salmon. This is quite impressive. Salmon. How can we confuse tuna with salmon? But at the end, I believe it's quite important for us also to bet on, I will say, fish literacy, because there is, I believe, a lot of Europeans that don't even know what fish they are eating, and if we present it on a plate, they don't even know. So I believe that we also need to improve the fish, I would say fish literacy. I don't know if there is a technical word for it, but fish literacy. And I remember to go to some restaurants in my hometown, and we had these boards on the walls with all kinds of fish and the names of the fish. And that's important, I presume. Also for us to have customers and consumers more informed, but more demanding for quality. And this, for me, is the main issue also. As you just referred, Vera, we import 70% of all the products that we consume here at the European Union. And this is why we need desperately to have the engagement of third countries with our standards, economic, social, and environmental standards. Because if not, and we cannot forget the results of the Eurobarometer that says for the first time, European consumers choose the fish based on price and not on quality. And when we choose fish based on price and not on quality, we need to be careful when we accept entering products from third countries without the same standards that we produce here, because it will create a competitiveness issue and will create, of course, a food security problem also. So we also want to, this transparency to help us to combat unfair competition, reduce the risk of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, the IUU, and give consumers information that they need to make informed and responsible choices. I am defending on the report the importance of standards between EU and third country products of labeling. And I believe that two articles on the CMO, Article 35 and 39, should be encouraged to be, I would say, mandatory, although 35 is only the one that is mandatory. But the most information that we can provide to consumers, the better. And there is technical ways through QR codes, for instance, that you can use it to track and have some kind of traceability of that fish that enters in the EU. We also have this iCatch system that is going to be started next year. We have signing with third countries some sustainable fisheries partnership agreements that are also quite important to maintain the traceability. And for sure, we cannot ignore that we need to import, but we need to import properly and correctly without creating these kind of problems like IUU or even forced labor issues or even quality ones. So to conclude, I will just want to say that I'll be very happy and attentive to the debate. And for sure, we are at the final stage of the compromises on the report. But at the end, I cannot accept that still in 2025 and 26, we still have these kind of issues. And there is one study that makes the difference between now and 10 years ago. So in 10 years, few things change. So this is not acceptable, especially here, even in the European institutions like the canteens of the European Parliament and the European Commission. So imagine if we cannot manage ourselves here, imagine outside. And I was saying, I hope no one here from that part of restaurants, but I was saying to a group of visitors that I'm receiving here in Brussels this morning, that avoid some of the restaurants near Grand Place, because you will not eat what you will pay for sure. So not being having any kind of prejudice of Wisconsin, sorry for that. This is why this is so important, and you can count on us, on EPP, to fight against the lack of transparency, and for sure we want to reach the best result possible in order to have all the supply chain correctly identified, but at the end to have consumers more informed, with more information, with more capacity to choose, and at the end with better food security in the European Union, and creating a good environment for development of business and the building of trust on our ORACA channels also. Thanks a lot. I'll be here for some while, and then when my colleague Sargiacomo arrives, I will leave. But thanks a lot. I'll be very attentive, and Mafalda is here also to take some notes on the conclusions of this debate. And I'll pass the floor to Mr. Aliofotu.
Thank you, Mr. Nascimento Cabral. Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Commissioner Kadis, I extend our sincere gratitude to Mr. Nascimento Cabral and Mr. Sargiacomo for hosting this event, for their kind invitation, but more generally also for their great support and excellent cooperation on the full array of issues we have. We know that we can always rely on their support, and thank you for that. Commissioner Kadis regrets for not being able to be here because of the prior commitment, because as you know, in 2 days there is the Fisheries Council, and it's extremely busy period, but he recognizes the importance. That's why he asked me to be. I hope I can stand to the height of the expectations. The theme of the seafood transparency could not be more timely. And it is therefore relevant and very valuable that the European Parliament, the NGOs and the stakeholders convene today to discuss on this seafood transparency, an issue which is central both for our consumers' trust, but also for fair competition within our European single market. Why consumer information on seafood really matters? I mean, maybe it's banal to explain that to you, but just to say a few words, the seafood is a key source of healthy protein for the Europeans. But as you mentioned earlier, almost 70% of the supply is covered by imports, and consumers depend heavily on the labels to understand what they are buying, where it comes from, and how it was produced. Mr. Cabral mentioned earlier about the price. Sometimes, including myself, we opt sometimes for the cheaper, but if we have clear information, we would be very happy to spend more to buy the more quality product. So clear, reliable information empowers the consumers to make informed decisions which are aligned with their values and preferences, whether it's quality, origin, or sustainability. It also rewards the operators who opt to prioritize responsible practices. They may charge more, but because of the practices also which are more responsible they follow. Therefore, robust traceability and information rules are also essential in combating the fraud and unfair competition, including the IUU fishing. And ultimately, transparency fosters a fair and level playing field in the EU market. Currently, the Common Market Organization regulation complements the general food information laws with seafood-specific requirements. For unprocessed and certain lightly processed fishery and aquaculture products, the CMO requires mandatory information such as the commercial designation and scientific name of the species, the production methods, caught or farmed, the geographical catch or production area, and a gear category for wild fisheries. The CMO also allows for voluntary information such as detailed gear types, environmental or social aspects, and specific origin, provided this information is clear, unambiguous, and truthful. In parallel, the revised Fisheries Controller Regulation will gradually introduce mandatory digital traceability for nearly all seafood products marketed in the EU, thus further strengthening the consumer information. Looking back in its 2013 report on the CMO's functioning, the Commission concluded that while labeling provisions have enhanced consumer awareness, there are three persistent debates which still remain on the table. The scope of mandatory rules, particularly for processed products such as canned or prepared products, the mandatory origin provenance information, including how meaningful it is for consumers, and which information is most relevant to reflect the sustainability of products. The Commission has launched a comprehensive evaluation of the Common Fisheries Policy Regulation, which will also examine its impact on the supply chain and consumers over the past decade. As part of this exercise, we will be assessing CMO rules, including on consumer information. For example, whether the current scope of mandatory information remains appropriate in light of market developments, consumer expectation, and the digital advances we have on the field, and also how effective current origin and provenance indicators are in enabling informed consumer choices and in ensuring the level playing field between the EU and non-EU operators. The evaluation will be completed in 2026. It will provide an evidence-based foundation for future policy decisions on seafood consumer information, including possible future adjustments to the CMO framework. Today's discussion, enriched by insights from NGOs, industry, and other stakeholders, will be a valuable contribution to this process. Our shared objective is clear. The EU consumers must be able to trust the information on their seafood, and responsible operators must see that transparency and high standards are rewarded. They pay off, not penalized, in the EU market. We wish you a very productive and insightful exchange, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Cabral, for your welcoming words. Thank you very much, Mr. Eliofotu, for that statement. And indeed, I think the last point that you emphasized, that consumers must be able to trust the information and must be given the information, and also responsible operators must be treated fairly and be rewarded for their responsible operations. I think those are two guiding themes for us to keep in mind in today's discussion. So with no further ado, I will hand over the speaking floor to my colleague, Dr. Marine Cuzat, who's a policy advisor at Oceana and who has been leading our transparency and traceability work, including the reports that you mentioned, Mr. Cabral, about the seafood sold in Brussels and served to consumers. So Marine, take us away.
Yes, thank you so much, Vera. Thank you everyone for being here. It's my pleasure as well to be here and present some of the results from our report to you. So I just wanted to start this series of presentation talking mostly about some of what we've heard already, the importance of seafood labels. And I guess I have to say next. Next, Vanya, please. So I'm not going to reiterate some of what was said already, but just briefly, as was mentioned, there's the Common Market Organization is the regulation currently that covers a lot of the seafood products regarding the different types of information that needs to be provided to consumers, including the species, the geographical catch location, the gear. But this applies only to fresh and frozen products that are whole or filleted and some types of preserved products. So next, Vanya, please. Unfortunately, there's a lot of seafood products in the EU that are not covered by the CMO regulation. So those are the prepared and preserved products. So for example, battered squid rings, pickled anchovies, some canned tuna, and also the products that are served in restaurants. And this actually accounts for almost half of the seafood that we consume in the EU. So it's not a negligible number of products. And what I'm going to do is use the example of squid to illustrate why this is a problem. So squid is not a species, it's a group of many species. There's over 300 species of squid that are traded globally. Well, they're not all traded globally, but many of them are traded globally. And they're not all managed very well. There are many of them that are not managed well at all. Some of them have even been associated with instances of IUU fishing and human rights abuse, as we're going to see in a next presentation. And however, the EU imports almost 80% of the squid that we consume. So without any information on some of those squid products, like battered squid rings, consumers are really exposed to consuming all types of products, really, and it's very difficult for them to make informed decisions. So next, Vanya, please. So Oceana wanted to kind of investigate what kind of squid species hides behind unlabeled products, basically. And what we did is that we sampled 198 squid samples in Brussels and in Milan. And we used genetic analysis to identify the species and also to try and evaluate where they come from in the world. And we also used UMOFA trade data to evaluate whether or not some of these species are possibly associated with instances of IUU fishing and human rights abuse. And I think it's important that I mentioned that we sampled really as randomly and as diverse as possible in terms of product types. So we sampled in retailers, restaurants, fishmongers, fresh, frozen products, processed products, etc. And the results are pretty striking. I mean, about half of the products that we sampled provided absolutely no information. So no information on the species, no information on the geographical catch, location. And the genetic analysis revealed that 90% of the products that provided zero information came from distant waters. So from the Pacific, Indian Ocean, and from the Southwest Atlantic. Next, Vanya, please. Thank you. So we can take a bit of a deeper dive, just specifically because we're in Brussels right now. So we looked at some of the squid that are served in 34 restaurants in Brussels, including the canteen of the European Parliament right here and the European Commission. And sadly, not a single one was able to tell us what the species was. So they were calamar, basically. But thankfully, the DNA tools was able to tell us what the species was, and more than 50% of them, so more than half of them, were the jumbo flying squid, which comes from the Southeast Pacific Ocean. And that also happens to be so it's one of the most traded species of squid in the world. It also happens to be one of the species that is associated with risks of illegal fishing and human rights abuse, particularly from certain types of fleet, the Chinese fleet. And when we looked at the UMOFA trade data, we also noted that the majority of the squid present in Belgium is imported from China. So it is difficult, of course, for us to know whether or not the squid transits through China and is fished by a different fleet, but we know that it is imported mostly from China. So it really raises questions on the possible risks associated with consuming that species. Next, Vanya. We also looked into some of the products that were labeled or indicated as coming from local waters. So local waters being the Mediterranean or the Northeast Atlantic. And well, more than 70% of them were in fact mislabeled and actually came from distant waters again. So either the Pacific or the Indian Ocean or the Southwest Atlantic. And I just want to point out that in Brussels, this type of mislabeling of the location and this claim that it's local, but it's not, came mostly from fishmongers and from restaurants. Next, Vanya, please. So, well, what do these results mean? It is a bit tricky. I mean, what we did notice is that the products that were fresh and frozen and that do fall under the CMO, in fact, were pretty good at providing the kind of information they should provide. So even though it wasn't implemented perfectly, it does show that the CMO certainly has value. And the restaurants were certainly the worst at providing any kind of information, really. And Oceana recommends that prepared and preserved products are included in the CMO and also the restaurant sector, because a lot of these products are served through restaurants. And as I was just showing, they do come from very far. And we also do recommend that consumers get information about the flag state, which is the nationality of the fleet that is targeting these species. Because when you look at some of these species and their geographical location, they are targeted by different fleets. Some of them might be targeted by the Spanish fleet and some of them by a Chinese fleet. And depending on which fleet is targeting them, you might be dealing with a very different set of problems. So without that information, it is in fact difficult to know whether or not the products are risky products. Next, Vanya. And so I just wanted to touch very briefly on that report that was mentioned earlier. We do have a brief somewhere, I believe, if you're interested. We also looked into some samples of bluefin tuna across Brussels in some restaurants, mostly because we had already done that study 10 years ago, and we wanted to see whether or not things have improved. And I do hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they haven't improved that much, not with respect to bluefin tuna, at least. So most of the bluefin tuna products were in fact mislabeled and were mostly yellowfin tuna. And I think this again illustrates very well the fact that if restaurants do not have to provide that information, and I think that one of the issue is that they don't know what they're serving, and when they're asked, they just give some kind of common answer, bluefin tuna, because what else could it be, right? So if restaurants are not included as part of the CMO, for example, and do not need to provide this type of information, they won't provide it, and they won't know what they're serving, even though they probably should. So that's it for me. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to you, Vera.
Thank you, Marine. Indeed, lots of food for thought, and I think the message is quite clear that we have whole categories of products that are simply not subject to any rules in terms of consumer information. We have whole categories of places of sale, so any restaurant doesn't have to provide that information, and that directly translates into a consequence, right? That the information is simply not provided, not available, and consumers are left buying things that they simply don't know what they are, where they come from, how they were caught. Also at the risk of buying, paying a higher price for a product that is not what they expect to be buying. So we have lots of issues here to chew on. And with that, I would like to invite Davide Mancini to take us forward and to explore a little bit deeper the issues of illegal fishing and human rights. Davide is an investigative journalist from Italy. He's currently part of the Ocean Reporting Network Fellowship at the Pulitzer Center. And with that, he has been investigating illegal fishing activities, particularly in West Africa. And his investigative work has been featured in many national and international media outlets in multiple languages. So Davide, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the organizer and to the MEP that are hosting us. So I would like to start with the first slide, please. So here I would like to show a picture and starting with what is happening on the ground in the West Africa. This is a person that I interview. It's like a teenage boy that he was the only survivor of a clash that happened between an industrial fishing trawler and a pirogue where Babacar, the young boy, was fishing in March 2024. The accident happened at night. The industrial fishing trawler had the light off, so the pirogue was not able to see that. And the industrial fishing trawler was fishing in a dedicated area only to artisanal fishers, so it was fishing illegally. What happened next? I think we can move to the next slide. I tracked down like the movements of this fishing trawler that is together with other 3 trawlers are part of a fleet that belongs to the same owner and to the same company that is based in Banjul in Gambia. And the capital is Chinese, the captains are Chinese, and the engineers are Chinese, while they are hiring people working on the trawlers locally. But what is more interesting for our panel today is what happened next. So we can move to the second one. So the Chinese trawlers are belonging to one company, but they used to dock and to land their catches to specific facilities that is not the port of Banjul, but is a private facility that is owned by a Spanish company. It's the main seafood frozen exporters in the Gambia. And from this moment, the catch that has been fished by the trawlers is sent to Europe, to the ports of Vigo in Spain, or to Leixões in Portugal, and to Naples and Gioia Tauro in Italy. That has been I was able to find out like the deliveries. And of course, I confronted with the company that is exporting that, and they are saying that they are not in the last year they haven't exported, they haven't bought seafood from these trawlers, but still they haven't done in the past. And what is interesting for this panel to question ourselves is like that everything was accompanied by a catch certificate. A catch certificate that is needed to be imported into the EU, and it was issued by the national authorities of the Gambia. But that is the first landing point. So the catch certificate has been created there, generated there, and it was shipped to Europe. And in this way, with this paper, it was not checked, and it was imported and circulated within the market. Next slide, please. So this is the main species that have been exported from the Gambia and are like happening mostly in shallow waters. It's of course it's easier to catch certain species closer to the coast, but this area is only available to artisanal fishers. So next slide. These are some of the recipients of what is exported from the Gambia to Europe. So as we said, it's Italy, Spain, and Portugal. And I wonder if that would be all the data that are actually reflected here. Of course, they're not all there because there is a Sustainable Fishery Partnership Agreement with the Gambia that allows European trawlers to fish there, and so it's not resulted as an export eventually. But there are other ways to circumvent, let's say, the export that is happening through illegal fishing, and that's lead me to the next slide. So this is a second story that I want to provide today as food for thought. And it's about the deckhand that I interview, and he was working in different foreign vessels that are operating in the Gambia. And my attention went to one particular vessel that is called Karama, and it's a vessel that I was looking for information for a long time, but I was only be able to see that it's flagged in Mauritania. And through the marine book of the interviewee, I was able to see that the company is based in Mauritania too. But the actual crew that was working on the vessels was Italian. And the company that he mentioned is Italian, and it was already involved in IUU fishing with other vessels in the past, and it was arrested in the past in the Gambia. And interestingly, he said that it was packed with the Italian brand, and it was brought to Dakar every second week, while the 3 months that he was working there. According to what he said, and according to the satellite data that I've checked, these vessels systematically turn off the AIS system, the satellite system, to enter into to get closer to the coast where it's not supposed to fish in the Gambia, and so it was trolling illegally there. So this made me question and wonder how this export that eventually would enter in the Italian market, it would be labeled, or how is it possible that there is this is just a real question. I don't know if it's like the existence of a front company in Mauritania that is created by the Italian company in order to avoid the certain limit and quota that there must be there. And And yeah, so as a conclusion, I would say that, as we can see, transparency would start from the very beginning of the issue of the catch certificate, but also there is an important issue of what we call it flag of convenience, in the sense that using like fishing rights from other nations by European companies, and in this way I think it's also creating not only an ecological threat or human rights threat, but also unfair competition with the very same companies, European companies that are operating in these waters. Thanks.
Thank you, Davide. And indeed, that's, as we were saying, we have this globally traded commodity that is seafood, and we have all the catch processing, exporting sector, but also all the corporate structures and all the ways that perhaps unscrupulous operators can hide their identity and hide their activities, thereby putting the serious operators at a competitive disadvantage, right? And the more transparency, the more light we can shine into these issues, the more we can also facilitate a fair treatment of those that do operate responsibly and within the rules. So I think the next presentation will follow up very, very nicely from yours. So I will invite Julien Dodu from the Environmental Justice Foundation to take the floor. Julien has a long experience in the fight against illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing. So Julien, please.
Thank you very much, Vera. Dear members of the European Parliament, dear representative from the Commission and member states, dear colleagues, so thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today on this important topic. As Vera said, I'd like to take you on a journey today. I would like to take you on a journey to the place where it all starts, basically to the high seas where the fishers are pushing themselves, often at a great personal cost, to fill the holes of some of the most intriguing fishing vessels, at least to me. So in a moment, through a short film, I'll bring you to the waters of the Southwest Atlantic, which follows also very well with the presentation that Marine gave. This is far offshore on the high seas, and the Environmental Justice Foundation, so GF, we had the opportunity to conduct field work only a few months ago there. This is one of the largest and regulated fishing area in the world. What we found there was stark. We witnessed the immense pressure exerted by some fleets. There, particularly, I have to say, those from China, on the resource that, as we've seen, we greatly value in Europe, which is squid. Let me maybe just mention one statistics here. There, in those particular waters, there are more Chinese squid fishing vessels than the entire EU distance water fishing fleet. So there, more Chinese vessels than the entire EU distance water fishing fleets. But it does not end there. As Marina said, our investigation provides clear evidence that the activities of this fleet are plagued by illegal fishing, as well as serious human rights abuses, as has been mentioned by previous speakers as well. And as we also discussed, some of this product, they ultimately end up on European shelves. Around 17% of the Argentinian short fin squid catches taken by the Chinese fleet operating there are exported to the European Union. And we can address that situation. What is needed at its core is to champion global fisheries transparency and multilateralism as well. It is also to uphold the EU global leadership with a zero tolerance stance against illegal fishing, ensuring that the unregulated dimension is fully considered within the dialogues. And there I want to recognize the exceptional contribution of the Commission through the carding system. And finally, it is also to strengthen import controls, ensuring that they properly cover high-risk species, such as those stemming from unregulated areas. And we've mentioned the catch certificate. And I think the digital catch certification scheme will help, but we must also realize the full potential of the EU forced labor regulation, because we're not just talking about illegal fishing. We're also talking about people that are just kept and victim of exploitative practices, and we need to keep that out of our supply chain. So I'll stop there, be brief, and maybe show a short video to take you on that journey. Thank you.
Hay un problema que es la pesca indiscriminada del recurso. Pesca que está librado, un recurso que está librado a su suerte, que nadie controla, que nadie verifica. Y bueno, y algo que a esta altura de la civilización no debería ocurrir, ¿no? Ni aquí ni en ningún lugar.
Global squid fishing industry is booming. Now a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that's growing at a staggering pace. Between 2017 and 2022 alone, fishing efforts surged by nearly 70%, and this expansion shows no signs of slowing down. Nowhere is this activity more heavily concentrated than in this remote patch of the South Atlantic, just beyond the edge of Argentina's territorial waters. This squid fishing hotspot lies just outside Argentina's exclusive economic zone, a 200-mile stretch where it has the right to manage and protect marine resources. But beyond that line, no single nation holds authority. Out here, vast industrial fleets, many of them Chinese, have descended in recent years. With no regulation and no one to answer to, these vessels can catch hundreds of thousands of tons of squid per season, with virtually no accountability.
Esta inmensa flota, esta cantidad de buques pesqueros, vienen a operar frente a lo que es el límite de la zona económica exclusiva argentina.
Está dentro de nuestra zona económica exclusiva, estricto plan de manejo de la especie calamar ilex argentino. Ello no sucede por fuera de ella, donde la flota extranjera que opera en ese lugar lo hace sin ningún tipo de manejo, ningún tipo de control, ni límite de captura.
More than half of the world's squid is caught without science-based catch limits or sustainability measures. Squid migrate freely in and out of Argentina's exclusive economic zone. Overfishing can go unnoticed, threatening the balance of the entire marine ecosystem in the region, where dolphins, seals, whales, seabirds, and fish all depend on squid as a vital source of food.
Ver una disminución abrupta de la abundancia del calamar se produciría un desequilibrio en toda la cadena trófica. Eso está claro.
The South Atlantic's unregulated squid fishery poses risks far beyond the viability of its intended catch. The massive fleet of predominantly Chinese vessels fishing here is plagued with allegations of illegal fishing, the intentional targeting of protected marine species, and grave human rights violations. These vessels can remain at sea for years at a time, sustained by huge motherships that handle refueling, resupply, and the transfer of catch. Isolated and far from any port, crew members, mostly from Indonesia and the Philippines, are vulnerable to exploitation, including forced labor, violence, and abuse.
Tiap hari itu pasti ada kekerasan. Kepala sampai dipukul sama pipa yang besi lah itu. Salah dikit main tangan.
Ya, kalau di kapal itu kapal saya kalau fisik kita masih bisa buat bekerja, itu masih bisa bekerja. Ya, pada waktu itu saya kerja di dalam freezer dengan waktu 18 jam. Ya, awalnya saya tangan saya terasa sakit itu setelah pekerjaan selesai saya membuka sarung tangan saya.
The story of squid follows a familiar pattern. New or rapidly expanding fisheries emerge without regulation, only improving their governance when external pressure is applied, or worse, after stock collapse draws global attention. This time, we have a unique opportunity to address this looming environmental disaster before it's too late. The time to establish meaningful protections is now, not only for squid populations themselves, but for the crews working on board squid fishing vessels.
Thank you, Julien, for sharing that really harrowing video with us. So we've discussed so far lots of issues around sustainability, consumer information, but also supply chain issues, human rights issues, and I would like to invite now a couple of quick reactions on all these elements that we have discussed, because they are also key to European interests, to our own competitiveness, and unfair competition also with European and fair operators. So I would like to first invite Mr. José Pellicer Pérez, who is the fisheries attaché at the Spanish Permanent Representation in Brussels. Mr. Pellicer will be speaking in Spanish, I believe. Thank you and welcome.
Now, okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. I will move to Spanish. Como ha comentado la compañera, mi nombre es José Pellicer, trabajo para la representación permanente de España aquí en la Unión Europea en temas de pesca y los últimos 10 años he estado trabajando en el Ministerio de Agricultura, siempre relacionado con temas de pesca y siempre con temas de comercialización pesquera, con lo cual todo este tema de la OCM me resulta muy familiar. Todo lo que tiene que ver con la información al consumidor, etcétera, pues bueno, he tenido la oportunidad de trabajar con estos temas. Bueno, yo creo que se están transmitiendo informaciones y se está hablando de temas que son muy importantes. Estamos hablando de muchas cosas. Es lucha contra la pesca ilegal, es protección de los derechos de los trabajadores, es claridad de los mercados en toda la cadena de suministro, no solo para el sector extractivo, estamos hablando de la totalidad del sector hasta el consumidor, por si no hablaríamos de información al consumidor. Y estamos hablando también pues, de controles a la importación, etcétera. Me gustaría hacer primero que nada, bueno, he ido tomando algunas notas, unas consideraciones generales en primer lugar, y es que en España, yo creo en la Unión Europea también, tenemos un sector y unas administraciones que están muy comprometidas con la sostenibilidad a lo largo de toda la cadena. Realizamos unos controles que son muy estrictos, son los estándares más elevados del mundo, los de la Unión Europea, y estamos totalmente de acuerdo en que pues, se tiene que garantizar un origen seguro para todos los productos que se consumen en el mercado. Somos el principal mercado de todo el mundo, principal mercado importador. Hay que trabajar en esta equivalencia de normas, en este level playing field y, por lo tanto, todo lo que sean mejoras en este aspecto, y siempre va a haber aspectos que mejorar, pues por supuesto vamos a estar ahí siempre, toda la Unión Europea y por supuesto España. Desde el punto de vista de las importaciones, pues también estamos de acuerdo en que es el punto crítico de todo este conjunto, porque es la primera barrera que tiene la Unión Europea para defenderse de la pesca ilegal, es controlar lo que entra. Y eso, sin lugar a dudas, es la primera barrera que tenemos que defender. En el caso de España, nosotros, no lo digo yo, no lo decimos nosotros, se nos ha reconocido como que aplicamos el mejor sistema de control de lucha contra la pesca ilegal. Esto, pues, hay un informe del Tribunal de Cuentas que así lo acredita. Efectuamos un control documental del 100% de los certificados. En frontera se revisan, se controlan el 100% de los certificados de captura y creo que puedo afirmar que somos el único Estado miembro que hace esto. También efectuamos un importante porcentaje de control sobre lo que son los desembarques de productos de terceros países en nuestros puertos. Aquí llegamos al 80%. El reglamento actual de lucha contra la pesca ilegal establece un 5%, nosotros hacemos un 80%. Es una cifra que yo creo que es considerable, o sea, se hacen muchos esfuerzos en este sentido. Y también hemos reforzado lo que es la inspección física de todas las mercancías que son objeto de importación. Hemos desarrollado un protocolo nacional. En el caso de España, tenemos un cuerpo de inspectores de pesca que se dedican exclusivamente a estas labores. Y bueno, en el contexto de y uniéndolo un poco a alguna idea que hemos trasladado ya también aquí en este foro, que es este gato por liebre que se llama en España, este cambio de especies, pues incluso estamos haciendo pruebas de ADN en este sentido. Más allá de lo que es los controles a la importación, me gustaría también destacar en todo lo que refiere a la transparencia y la información al consumidor, la trazabilidad. Pues bueno, no quiero recordar lo que ya se ha dicho, pero creo que es importante y todos ya lo sabemos, que aquí hay dos ámbitos muy importantes. Una cosa es el reglamento de control y otra cosa es el reglamento de la OCM. Son cosas distintas. Otra cosa es que parte de la información que se debe de transmitir obligatoriamente en materia de trazabilidad coincida con información al consumidor. Esto es muy importante porque se tiene que transmitir a lo largo de toda la cadena, involucra a todos los eslabones de la cadena, y estamos totalmente de acuerdo también en que, y así lo hemos manifestado en la evaluación de la política pesquera común, que hemos tenido oportunidad de hacer nuestras aportaciones, que la OCM debe ser revisada para incluir las conservas y los preparados. Pero nosotros ya hemos ido más allá y puedo afirmar también que el pasado 6 de diciembre, este sábado, en España se publicó una norma con la que se prevé ya que se regulen las denominaciones comerciales y afectará también a conservas y a preparados. Y creo que esto es un paso muy importante que damos desde España en este sentido. Y bueno, contribuimos también con nuestro programa nacional de trazabilidad al respecto y se aplica en toda la cadena. Así que estamos trabajando mucho y esperamos trabajar más también. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. It's a good list of examples that really shows that Spain is indeed one of the member states that really prioritizes the fight against illegal fishing. Of course, everything can be improved, but I think there's also a lot to learn from that national experience to bring it also to a more European level. So next I will invite also a quick reaction from Nicolas Evangelidis from the Pew Charitable Trusts, also a great expert on the fight against illegal fishing. Nicolas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vera. I think the presentations today serve as a stark reminder and reinforce the scale of the problem. And this is a problem of purely regulated fishing and unregulated fishing. Unregulated fishing, the third U in IUU, is often overlooked and remains a major governance gap. Massive amounts of unregulated fishing, mainly squid or pota in Spanish, occurs in the high seas as we've seen, for example, in Southwest Atlantic and Indian Ocean. Fishing effort, as we've seen in the EJF video, has increased by 80% between 2017 and 2020. But what's interesting is that 85% of that effort increase is in the unregulated areas. This is a massive industry which is projected to worth 14 billion euros by 2032. All this matters because fish populations, health of the habitats, vulnerable economies, and food security are at stake. Squid plays a critical role, not just as a direct fishery, but also as prey species for key stocks like tuna and salmon. It matters because, as you have seen, IU fishing, including unregulated fisheries, is often linked to horrible, shocking human rights abuses. Left unchecked, unregulated fishing could continue expanding to other ocean areas, but also to other species, until we systematically address this. So what can we do, and why we need the Parliament's and the Commission's help? My colleagues have already mentioned a few recommendations, including on the CMO, and I'm sure more will be made in the panel discussion later. From my side, I would like to highlight another key opportunity for next year, the meeting of the FAO Committee on Fisheries, to prioritize action on unregulated fisheries. Firstly, the EU should encourage and support other states in seeking FAO's assistance in clarifying their international law obligations and use of existing tools to bring unregulated fisheries under regulation. Secondly, the EU, together with other states, could propose that FAO initiates formal expert discussions on how to advance international cooperation on unregulated fisheries. And thirdly, the EU, together with other states, should ask FAO to develop technical or voluntary guidelines specifically on unregulated fisheries. We have the tools to fight this. We had Spain's example, so we know what can be done. We have the UN Law of the Seas. We have International Labour Organization C188 on Working Fishing Convention. We have the IMO Cape Town Agreement on fishing vessel safety. We have the FAO Post-State Measures Agreement. We have the Compliance Agreement. We have the EU International Plan of Action. We have the Global Record. We have the EUIU regulation, the cutting scheme, and the forced labor regulation. We also have NGO tools like the Global Charter for Fish Transparency. What we need is for them to be fully implemented. We need for these countries to be supported by bigger countries like the EU and other developed countries because they have the means to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicolas. That's a great note to end on, which is that we have indeed a host of tools, right? We need to implement them, we need to use them, we need to strengthen them where necessary, but there's a lot of work at our disposal that we can indeed engage in to address the sustainability and the human rights issues that we've seen discussed in the previous presentations. So as you alluded to, we will now have a good discussion also among different stakeholders from across the supply and consumer chain to reflect also on the message that we have heard so far. So we will be hearing from Enrique García, who represents the Spanish consumer organization, Organización de Consumidores y Usuarios. Please forgive my Portuñol. We will also be hearing from Jordi Attal, who is a chef of a Michelin star restaurant. We will hear from Carmen González Valles, who works with the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, and also from Janne Posti from Conchemar. So perhaps I will start with, sorry, please, Mr. Cabral.
Sorry, I will have to leave because I have an intervention in one other meeting, but I just want to thank all the speakers and to highlight two issues that I didn't mention in my initial speech. One is the BBNJ, that now the transposition for a directive here at European Parliament was approved, and we'll have more tools now to monitor and to intervene in the areas that are going beyond the national jurisdiction. So I believe it could be a very useful tool for us to control what we just saw near Argentina EEZ. And secondly is the reform of the customs authorities in the European Union. And this is what I stated in the report, the need to have a more harmonized approach in the controls in every port of the European Union, not differently, because we know that some of the imports coming differently from they use some different ports because they know that the control will be easier or will be less, will be more flexible. So we need to harmonize all of them. And this European agency that is going to be created for the European Agency for Customs, European Agency EUCA, European Union Agency for Customs, will help us a lot to control also what enters the European Union. But again, we need to work using our ocean diplomacy and international governance and all of our international agreements to ensure that these third countries comply with this, and we need a new generation of the free trade agreements of FPAs in order to have access to all the detailed approach on these agreements, and also to see locally if they are getting the support that we are paying as a European Union or not, to reaching the small communities that sometimes faces the highest risk on this. Thanks a lot. Sorry, but I have to leave, and I wish you a very good debate. And my colleague, I think, is arriving just now.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Cabral, for those remarks and for your support. And thank you for joining us for the first part of this meeting. So we will continue then with our panel discussion. So Enrique, maybe I can start with you because you represent indeed the consumer organization, the consumer interests. So I wanted to start with your reflection on why it is important for consumers and for consumer organizations to have access to this information about seafood. Can you use the microphone, please, for the interpretation?
Gracias a la organización por permitirme intervenir y hacer lo que legalmente yo represento, y es representar los intereses generales de los consumidores en España, y también me permito a nivel europeo, ¿no? Mi organización pertenece al Consejo de Consumidores y como tal llevo esa tarea. De forma rápida para permitir también el debate al resto de paneles. Preguntaba sobre por qué es importante la información para los consumidores. Muy sencillo. La información es un derecho de los consumidores. Los consumidores tenemos derecho a conocer la verdadera naturaleza y características de los productos. Por tanto, es fundamental que los consumidores tengamos una información adecuada. También hay otra cuestión. El etiquetado del origen garantiza la trazabilidad y eso deriva en otro derecho fundamental e importante de los consumidores, la seguridad. El pescado que no se cumple, que es ilegal, pues es ilegal en todos los aspectos. No solo en el respeto de los derechos humanos, también en el respeto de las cuestiones medioambientales y también en la cuestión de la seguridad, ¿no? Decía el eurodiputado que este era un problema conjunto, y lo es. Hemos visto en las investigaciones cómo los productos adquieren el pasaporte europeo de una forma muy rápida, sin que se cumplan todas esas cuestiones de obligaciones que ya figuran en el reglamento europeo, en el reglamento de la Organización Mundial del Comercio. El representante de España en la REPER hablaba de que en España se hace un buen trabajo, pero no es suficiente. Si hay otros puertos donde se obtiene el pasaporte europeo, al final se le hurta al consumidor lo que es un derecho fundamental. Por eso nosotros, desde hace muchísimo tiempo, hemos reivindicado la extensión del origen de los productos en el etiquetado, pero no solo en el producto como tal. Hay una gran batalla, en este reglamento no, en el reglamento de derechos de información del consumidor. Asiente, dice, una gran batalla porque se traslade al producto procesado, porque ahí de nuevo se pierde la nacionalidad. Y no olvidemos que la etiqueta también es una herramienta que tienen los consumidores para tomar decisiones de consumo sostenible. Si los consumidores no conocen el origen, no pueden tomar decisiones en función de reducir el impacto ambiental de sus actos de consumo. Por tanto, sí, desde la Unión Europea queremos potenciar el consumo sostenible y hay un compromiso político de todos los países en avanzar hacia esa cuestión. Tenemos que garantizar que los consumidores tienen esa información en el etiquetado.
Thank you so much, Enrique, for those remarks. You were talking about consumers having information on the products that they buy, but we are also joined by Jordi Artal, who owns restaurants and is a very well-known chef with 2 Michelin stars. So, of course, consumers or clients in your restaurants, they consume seafood in a different way, right? You are presenting them with the seafood that they are eating. So from your perspective, how important is this question of information about what customers are eating in your premises?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here this afternoon. On the issue of consumers, I look at it as 2 perspectives, because I am also a consumer, because the person buying the seafood is the restaurant, and then I in turn, I'm serving to the customer. I think Enrique makes some very, very good points, because I think in the end, information is power. And when you empower the end user, myself in this case, or my customer, to make the right decisions, there's no harm ever done here. It's only positive outcome. You know, when we opened the restaurant 20 years ago, it was very easy to know where your tomato came from, you know, a bit less so where your meat came from, and impossible to know where your seafood came from. And in 20 years, we've made great strides in that. We measure it. Now when we order seafood every day, it arrives with its traceability certificate. But given the choice, I know that many purveyors would rather not include that certificate because it's a bureaucratic overhead, whatever, but the information provides is invaluable, you know, and it's in our DNA in the restaurant that I'm at to worry about sustainability, to worry about provenance of the ingredients. And the customers that come to our restaurant are also very much, more and more so, very invested in knowing what they're eating, where it came from, how it was fished, is it sustainable, is it adhering to the best standards of the day. So we are very much focused on that in the restaurant. And I think for the end consumer, in my case, the chefs, as well as the diner, it's valuable information.
Thank you. And it's clearly information that people want to have. So people want to know what they are consuming. So I'm sure in your line of business, there's actually that dialogue really on what.
Yeah, and in fact, when we are explaining dishes in the restaurant, we actually do talk about where the food is coming from, you know, if there's again, whether it's a vegetable or it's a meat or it's a seafood product, we want people to know where it's coming from. And they are very interested in where it's coming from. And I think most consumers will be surprised, as I was today, at this issue. And also I want to say, I'm not sure how everyone felt, I'm sure the same as me, but the video made me quite sad actually, at the state of affairs on the open sea. We are not treating the oceans as we perhaps should be doing. And I think it behooves all the stakeholders here to help consumers make the right decisions.
Indeed, that video was really harrowing, and I think one of the elements that is raising from our discussion today is the issue of squid and of cephalopods in general, perhaps. And I think that's a good segue to talk to Carmen, because Carmen, you work with the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership and specifically on the supply chain roundtables on octopus and squid. So you dedicate a lot of attention precisely to raising awareness and finding solutions to these issues on the different elements of sustainability relating to these fisheries. So could you let us know also as a representative from those roundtables, working very closely with the industry, how do you think that this lack of transparency impacts also the mid-supply chain companies and the retailers?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, for being here today. Voy a pasar a hablar español, porque no hay muchos foros en los que podamos aprovechar y hablar nuestro idioma. Bueno, yo trabajo con SFP, Sustainable Fisheries Partnership. Trabajamos con las empresas de la cadena de suministro de pescado. Somos una ONG. Como comentabas, yo trabajo con las cadenas que se encuentran en la mitad de la cadena y para que los podáis identificar son importadores en mercados de destino, que son proveedores directos en muchas ocasiones del sector retail, minoristas, supermercados o empresas del canal Horeca, ¿no? Generalmente todas las empresas con las que trabajamos es porque quieren adquirir o adquieren compromisos de abastecimiento responsable, políticas de compra sostenibles, y estos compromisos generalmente se basan en los principios rectores de Naciones Unidas de Empresas y Derechos Humanos en muchas ocasiones, que se centran en proteger, respetar y remediar, ¿no? El retail, generalmente, me ha gustado el punto de Jordi Altal, que dice, es también un consumidor. Y el retail traslada esta exigencia muchas veces a sus proveedores directos, que son estos importadores y son las empresas con las que yo trabajo más de cerca, ¿no? Traspasan esta responsabilidad. Entonces, a mí me da la sensación también que la falta de transparencia en el etiquetado en muchas ocasiones se traduce en una falta de trazabilidad propia del retail como consumidor. Es decir, el retail muchas veces no tiene, o el distribuidor o el comprador no tiene la información que falta en esa etiqueta al consumidor. Eso es una realidad con la que estamos trabajando y con la que estamos ayudando a estas empresas con las que trabajamos a identificar de dónde vienen los productos que ellos están comercializando. Existe el certificado de captura, que evidentemente es una herramienta muy útil y, como han comentado, pues, se controla a distinto nivel en distintos países. Pero al final el certificado de compra no es una herramienta manejable para un comprador que está comprando el día al día productos, porque toda esa información es prácticamente imposible de tratar, almacenar y verificar, ¿vale? Y sin trazabilidad se le disparan los riesgos a una empresa que quiere implementar protocolos de debida diligencia. Y voy a dar un ejemplo que está relacionado con el calamar que acabamos de ver de la milla 201, que no es calamar, que es pota, la pota argentina. Solo el nombre ya nos envía a una denominación geográfica que no es tal, porque lo primero que piensa un consumidor que vaya a ver pota argentina es que es un producto que viene de Argentina y está distribuido en la zona FAO 41, que es la segunda información que nos vamos a encontrar en el etiquetado. FAO 41 cubre 3 países costeros que pescan la pota, más todas las flotas de aguas distantes. Acabamos de hacer nosotros también una pequeña investigación, un pequeño piloto de trazabilidad digital, y una de las cosas que nos hemos dado cuenta es que compradores que han participado voluntariamente de este piloto, sus compras se refieren a certificados de captura de hace 2 años. Entonces, la trazabilidad en tiempo real es algo prácticamente imposible. Una pota o un calamar que se come ahora mismo, o de los que han tomado muestras para este informe, se pudo haber pescado hace 2 años. Por lo tanto, la transparencia aguas arriba de la cadena de valor es esencial para ese proceso de verificación. Es casi un prerequisito, porque otro ejemplo nos lleva al potón del Pacífico, el Dosidicus gigas, donde sí que existe una organización regional de pesca y donde las organizaciones regionales de pesca estamos familiarizados con las listas de barcos IUU. Bueno, la lista de barcos de esta OROP está vacía, la lista de barcos IUU. Por lo tanto, ni siquiera empresas que quieran verificar que están comprando a barcos que podrían estar en una de estas listas lo pueden hacer, porque esa información no existe. Entonces, esta transparencia aguas arriba es un prerequisito para cualquier empresa que quiera trabajar de forma responsable. Y, por último, la trazabilidad es lo que garantiza y facilita cualquiera de estos análisis de riesgos, especialmente en productos de alto riesgo como son las potas y los calamares, que así deben considerarse. Por lo tanto, es esencial la transparencia y la trazabilidad para cualquier empresa que quiera involucrarse en procesos de diligencia debida siguiendo los principios rectores de Naciones Unidas. Y además creo que había que pensar también en la trazabilidad de otra manera. Creo que la trazabilidad se está pensando siempre hacia aguas arriba. Es decir, que el operador, el consumidor, el que compra, sea responsable de verificar todo lo que pasa detrás suyo. Sin embargo, también tendríamos que mirar en cómo fomentar la trazabilidad desde la captura, para que esa información sea más fácil integrada en el nuevo sistema, por ejemplo, de digitalización Catch, que va a ser implementado por la Unión Europea.
Thank you very much, Carmen. And I would also just like to say hello and welcome to our other host of today, MEP Sargiacomo. Thank you so much for joining us. We were just in the middle of the panel debate with the stakeholders from the supply chain. And I think, Carmen, you made really very important points, which is that transparency and traceability and information is necessary at every point of the chain. So very, very important. And I think one element that you also alluded to is information, not just data, right? Because data, scientific names, etc., can be available, or geographic regions, but we need information, something that is understandable to consumers, actually something that we can digest. And that leads me then to the next question, and I would like to invite Janne to reflect on this. So Janne, you represent Conchemar, which is a seafood association of wholesalers, importers, exporters, manufacturers, and you represent more than 200 companies in the seafood sector. So we heard previously that there's also these regulations like the Common Markets Organization regulation, and that it's currently being evaluated and it could be reviewed. So what is your position from Conchemar's perspective on that?
First of all, many thanks, Vera, and the entire NGO coalition for inviting me here today. And we are talking very important topics today. And regarding the CMO regulation, just simplified, Consumer supports a targeted revision of the CMO, notably the Article 35 on consumer information, because the aim is to ensure that all seafood products in the EU provide clear and consistent and accessible information for to consumers. And we have heard today that fresh and frozen products already have the requirements to display the key information when it comes to the name and catch area and fishing gear and production method. And we believe that extending the similar requirements to all seafood products that we place on the EU market obviously ensure the equal treatment of all products across the product types, and it also reinforces the consumer trust and market transparency. So basically, in short, we support the level playing field on this matter, and because we know that we cannot impose the CFP regulations so easily to the third countries or manage the third country fisheries. And but however, the consumer information rules are something that are under the control of EU authorities and EU operators, and this is how a level playing field on this issue can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Janne. So clearly there's openness and even appetite, I think, from the, let's say, business sector of the equation. I would like to perhaps go back to Enrique, because I was wondering also from the consumer side of the equation, you mentioned consumer rights. We have the right to information, we have the right to consume safe products. But what about the value? What kind of value do you think that consumers attach to having this information? Do they actually reward with their pocket the instances in which they have the information about origin, sustainability?
Perdón. Hablaba antes el europarlamentario de que según el Eurobarómetro los consumidores priman el precio sobre cualquier otra cuestión. En el contexto actual de crisis de precios sigue siendo el primer vector de decisión de compra. Esa es la realidad. Ahora bien, una encuesta que hemos realizado en OCU a más de 1.000 consumidores señala que el 57% considera determinante el origen de los productos en sus decisiones de compra. Es una cifra significativa y que nosotros creemos que ha ido en aumento. Es más, le preguntamos cuánto estarían dispuestos a pagar más por un etiquetado más completo que incluyera el origen. Hasta un 5%. Esto es bastante. Esto es bastante en un contexto donde los consumidores llegan a entender que esos mecanismos de transparencia tienen un coste mayor y lo quieren primar. Por tanto, sí que es valiosa la decisión para los consumidores en cuanto a términos de cuantía, y también lo es para aquellos que quieren ejercitar decisiones de consumo sostenible, que no son posibles en los productos del mar y el marisco si no se conoce el origen y el etiquetado. Y por cierto, hablando de etiquetado y hablando de reforma, ustedes son profesionales y manejan las zonas FAO con una soltura tremenda. Les garantizo que los consumidores no conocen lo que es la FAO 41. Seamos realistas, no lo conocen. Exigimos un etiquetado más claro, más entendible por el consumidor. ¿Y por qué? Porque con esto tomará decisiones de compra. Lamentablemente la realidad es muy distante de lo que dice la normativa. Nosotros hemos hecho un reciente estudio sobre el origen del etiquetado de productos del mar que precisamente ha financiado el Ministerio de Consumo en España, ¿no? Los resultados en cuanto al calamar, por ejemplo, son que en las pequeñas pescaderías el 81% de las etiquetas no indicaba el origen. Esa es la realidad. Los consumidores valoran el origen, pero en determinados segmentos de la distribución, hay que decir que en la distribución más grande, en los supermercados sí había un mayor etiquetado, pero en el pequeño, por ejemplo, donde en España es determinante a la hora de vender productos del mar, el 81% no indicaba ese origen.
Thank you, Enrique. So we are clearly in a situation where the consumer has information on the price, right? They can see the price of the product. They don't necessarily have the information on the origin, the catch method, etc., but they would value it. If they had it, maybe they would change their consumer habits. And this is where we have the opportunity then to establish that level playing field that we were talking about by giving that information to consumers and enhancing the competitiveness of those that do play by the rules, that do operate sustainably. We have made good progress in terms of recovering a little bit of time. So I will take the opportunity to open the floor to a couple of questions. So if anyone would like to inquire anything of our panel, I see already a few hands going up. I will ask each of you, when asking a question, to please identify yourselves, to keep your question very short, really, ideally one sentence, not long statements, so that we can give the opportunity to a few people before handing the floor to Mr. Sargiacomo to close the meeting. So I will start here, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Anne-France Matelet. I'm working for Europesh, and we are the professional association representing European fisheries and vessels, as well as fishers. So it's very interesting to see that traceability and information to the consumers seems to be important for everybody here. I think it's important to hear also the voice of the vessels, of the European vessels, because this is something we've been asking for a long time now. And at the end of the Oceana presentation, there was an indication about the importance of the flag state information. For us, this is extremely important. Why? Because the flag states, you may think that when you buy a tomato or beef, you always want to know where this beef has been raised, where the tomato has been put. Why wouldn't that be the same for the fish? The transformation place is not the flag of the vessel which has fished the fish. And the flag state is a label in its insect, because when you buy from a certain flag, and I would say the European flag, then you know that the labor law of the member states apply, so that each year there are inspection from labor officials from the governments who come and check that all the laws are respected. It also means that the vessels, they operate under the EU control regulation, which is, I don't remember who said, the strictest in the world. This is true. When you buy from another flag, you don't know actually what has been the law, how it has been implemented and controlled. I think it was Mrs. Gonzalez-Valles who said that the retail doesn't have the information. That's why they are not transmitting it. This is true because, for example, the control regulation with all the traceability imposition doesn't apply to non-EU vessels. If you buy European, you know this, and you can put it on the label. So this is extremely important, but we also think that the burden must not be only on the consumer. As Mr. Garcia said, it's important for the consumer to have a produce which has a good price, especially now with the crisis. This means that this information and the obligation that lies with the products are the responsibility of both the EU and the member state. And if I give a few examples, it means that due diligence must be the same for all, not only for EU operators. And we see that 2 months ago, the EU Commission decided to report sine die the obligation that will be put in a delegated act for non-EU companies. Same rules to enter the market, and also impose social standards for all the products that enter the market. Currently, not only there is not such standards, but you also can benefit from duty-free when you are an exporter from non-EU country through the ATQ or the free trade agreements without having any obligation, which is close to those of the European vessels. So this is I'm sorry, it's not a question, but just to say that the European fleet is totally convinced by this idea of traceability. Just be careful. Some things might seem simple, but they are not. I heard that there was a problem with AIS, for example. It's true that the vessels must all have AIS, and this is an anti-collision tool. But how do you control where the vessel goes, what he fishes, and what he does? This is through a different tool, which is called VMS, Vessel Monitoring System, and which relates to the member state obligation. even the European flagged vessels sometimes close their AIS, not to enter in forbidden zones, but for example, when they enter into piracy zones. This is very important, so pirates cannot see them on the internet, which is the case. We had a piracy attack 1 month ago again on the Intertunatres, for example. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-France, and for that statement and for all the precisions. I think I had a hand there at the back, the gentleman in the back. Perhaps you can approach a microphone because the interpreters needed it for the interpretation. If perhaps someone, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Mr. Baruti. As you can see, I'm an African. And first of all, I want to thank for the presentation from your neighbor and Gillian and the on African illegal fishing in West Africa. And I want just to complete Gillian to say that we cannot reduce irregular fishing in Africa if we don't take into consideration the behavior of African leaders themselves. When we see a vessel, like Madame says, arrested by African Navy, but when they try to proceed to regulation, you will learn 1 week later that they have a financial transaction between them and they release the vessel. How we can continue to tackle, as you say, tolerance zero, to tackle the issue if African leaders themselves, they don't like to keep the issue in respect. It's very difficult. And 2 years ago, they caught Russia 2 times in the coastal zone of Senegal. 2 times they find a financial transaction before the issue was raised at African Union Commission. So it's better to get involved also the African leaders. Thank you, Madam.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you very much. And this is indeed also where the EU can play a very big role, not only through its market power, but I believe it was also Julien that highlighted the whole carding process and the dialogues that also the European Union has with other countries precisely to try to improve the standards of fight against illegal fishing around the world. So thank you for bringing that contribution. I believe we have time for one more intervention. Very short, please.
Yes, thank you, Vera. So this is a huge topic, so there will be a lot of things to say. But I would like to maybe ask Jordi, please don't buy stuff if you're not given information. Voila. I would like to say thank you to Pepe, because it is very important that the controls are literally implemented properly. This is what the processing industry has been saying since forever, because it seems that as it is that there aren't 100% controls, that absolutely everything's illegal. So it is very important that there is a level playing field in terms of how we control our imports. I wanted to come back also to the gentleman that made a comment. I think we're simplifying this thing a little bit too much. We're almost making it ridiculous. IUU is a criminal offense. So me putting any sort of data, literally the way our consumers in the European Union read their stuff when they actually do the shopping, I wish that would help. IUU is a criminal offense, guys, okay? So obviously it's actually very important that there is a level playing field in between everything, also all the products. You have the 1604 and the 1605 that now with the fisheries control regulation in 2029 will have to align. It's very important also for me, for the room and the people that are watching you online, that you mainly have speakers from Spain in the room. So when you are given percentages, please kindly understand that not every single city or country is the same. Also, it is not correct that the fish doesn't travel with information. If you have the information, and obviously when you don't have the information, we're speaking about fraud. We're not speaking about a market when we speak about the European Union that is cowboy ran. Okay, so it's very important to me that this comes out of also this event, because we're not cowboys in the European Union, and we're very much against fraud. And criminal stuff like IUU cannot be simplified to give me a flag, this flag. And I think actually also when you give a flag, you haven't got the slightest idea who the hell is behind the boat. So, I mean, to be honest with you guys, it's all cool. We can all give $1.5 zillion, but that's not the point. And another very important thing is the basis of this problem is that we're not allowing countries that are in development to develop. And this is the fault of the Western world, us sitting in this room. I can just a tiny little one, Vera. I mean, 50% of the world that is poor. Let me not speak about China, because China is a country that has its own growth trajectory. China is also not exactly an idiot country, and China is also not exactly underdeveloped in every single way. So there is a specific, we need to transcend the mentality and the conversation that is past century. We need to transcend a little bit stuff that we're saying around here, because this sometimes seems to me that it's literally level first grade kindergarten. It can't be like that. And the system, the economic system of the Western world, it dictates so that the developing country will always be one step behind. And as it is that we keep them where they are, we're incredibly responsible of that. We cannot exactly be so hypocrite as to actually come to Africa. We've colonized the soul out of this continent, okay? And we still, our economic system is why there isn't, without development, guys, we can ask whatever we want, because we have money here. We can buy stuff that we want.
Yeah.
They
Thank
don't.
you.
So it's a very serious conversation. We're speaking about criminal offenses. We're not speaking about peanuts.
Yes.
And there's a lot of information on fish on the EU market, most probably more than anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely, thank you. No, I think we're all agreed around this table that illegal fishing is something that we must absolutely fight. Transparency is one of the ways that we can do it, and there are many elements of the problem to be addressed. So I really want to thank everybody for their contributions. I want to thank my team for the amazing work in organizing this event. I want to thank the interpreters who've been brilliant as well. And I will pass to our host, Member of Parliament, Eric Sargiacomo, to give us a few closing remarks before we must liberate the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will speak in French, not in Spanish, but I understand. À votre écoute, même si j'ai pas pu vous écouter beaucoup, parce que on est très occupé les semaines pré-plénières, mais c'est pour moi très important d'avoir pu co-organiser avec mon collègue de Nascimento Cabral cet événement sur la transparence. Parce que la transparence, je pense qu'on la doit à tous les citoyens européens. Dans nos actes au quotidien au Parlement européen, on parle beaucoup de transparence. On parle beaucoup de transparence sur les produits que l'on consomme. Et c'est vrai qu'en matière de pêche, on est un peu moins transparent. On n'a pas les mêmes règles que sur les indications géographiques, cette même précision. Et malheureusement, on importe 70% des produits de la mer que nous consommons. Donc cette transparence, elle est importante, elle est vitale pour les produits européens, mais aussi pour tout ce que nous importons. Je dois dire que quand j'ai vu le thème, certaines images me revenaient, et notamment du documentaire The Outlaw Ocean Project de Ian Urbina, ou encore les enquêtes du IGF sur les bâtiments chinois et les esclaves, parce qu'il n'y a pas d'autre terme, nord-coréens qui travaillaient dessus. On a l'impression que l'océan est un vaste Far West, où les règles sociales, environnementales, commerciales sont piétinées et où au sol prévaut finalement la loi du plus fort. la loi de la jungle. Tout cela pourquoi? Pour que des captures illégales réalisées par des prisonniers politiques soient transformées par des Ouïghours, puis congelées, transportées par cargo et servies au bout du compte dans nos supermarchés ou restaurants, avec en plus un impact carbone désastreux. Cette situation devient insupportable. Et le pire, c'est que nous, vous, moi, les citoyens, ignorons tous des drames qui se cachent derrière notre assiette, la plupart du temps, même si vous faites tout pour nous informer au niveau des ONG. C'est pourquoi je tiens à remercier Oceana et la Fondation pour leur engagement. Votre travail est essentiel. Il l'est parce qu'il révèle des abus, des réalités invisibles pour la plupart des citoyens. En plus, cette information circulera, plus les citoyens pourront faire pression sur leur gouvernement, sur la Commission, sur les intermédiaires. Il nous aide aussi, nous, parlementaires, à adapter nos analyses, nos propositions législatives, nos amendements à chaque fois que nous avons un texte réglementaire à voir. Mes priorités pour ce mandat, et que je partage avec mes collègues du groupe SND, mais également avec mon collègue de Nascimento Cabral, qui est d'un autre groupe politique que le mien, le PPE, elles sont assez simples. Nous ne sommes pas hostiles au commerce international, comme je peux l'entendre dire de temps en temps, mais ce commerce ne doit pas nuire à l'environnement ni aux producteurs, en particulier quand il s'agit de pêche artisanale, qu'elle soit européenne ou qu'elle soit d'ailleurs africaine ou ailleurs qu'en Afrique. Il ne doit pas être en contradiction également avec les valeurs sociales, environnementales et commerciales de l'Union. Les enquêtes présentées aujourd'hui montrent que les souffrances des populations en Europe, en Afrique et en Asie sont alimentées par une logique de profit à tout prix, au mépris de l'humain comme de la nature. Alors que faire? Informer les citoyens des violations des droits humains, de la destruction des écosystèmes, du pillage des ressources marines dans des pays souvent africains ou d'Amérique latine ou d'Asie, laissés exsangues par nos passages et les passages de finalement des gens qui exploitent ces ressources. Informer les consommateurs et faire respecter nos normes. Il ne peut y avoir d'accès à nos marchés sans conformité avec nos règles. Une des clés est la traçabilité. Imposer un étiquetage clair, ça a été dit, espèces, méthodes de pêche, pavillons, zones exactes, et pas seulement effectivement les zones de la FAO que personne ne comprend. Durabilité, voire le nom du navire, ce sont des pratiques déjà répandues en agriculture, comme je le disais auparavant. La Commission doit s'en inspirer. Et à mes yeux, la révision du règlement OCM est plus qu'urgente que celle de la PCP. Et pourtant, personne ne parle vraiment de l'OCM. Tout le monde est sur la PCP. En octobre dernier, lors d'une mission parlementaire à Cibourg, au Pays Basque, nous avons visité une conserverie artisanale, Kochiak, une entreprise locale, ancrée dans son territoire, respectueuse des savoir-faire traditionnels, des ressources humaines et naturelles. Elle incarne le modèle que je souhaite promouvoir. Un modèle qui respecte les femmes, les hommes, la mer et la nature. Merci à toutes et tous pour votre engagement. Maintenant, il faut traduire tous ces constats et ces bonnes paroles en actes et le chemin sera le plus long. Et à faire appliquer ces actes ensuite, ce sera encore plus long. Il nous faudra de la patience, mais de la conviction et je suis sûr que toutes et tous ici, vous en avez et donc ensemble, on y arrivera.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we're at the end of our time and there's another event starting. So if I could invite you to please vacate the room as quickly as possible. I'm sure there's a lot of discussion, but maybe we can take it outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you.